Hey folks, welcome to the Writer's Cabin. It's about 11 o'clock Monday night, and it's getting late, but I've been working on a story today and just wanted to kind of try to get it out tonight. Today I'd like to paint a picture of what it looks like when real American heroes meet cowards. I'm Jeff Newton, a former producer at 60 Minutes and a former senior producer at both Vice on HBO and National Geographic Television. I'd like to start off by telling you three stories. They're short. Most Americans hadn't heard about them till today. Three men, three different wars. Their actions were honored today at the White House with medals of honor. First one, Command Sergeant Major Terry Richardson. On September 14th, 1968, Richardson was a staff sergeant on a reconnaissance mission on Hill 222 in the vicinity of Lac Ninh, Vietnam, when his unit came under fire from the North Vietnamese Army. It started with heavy machine gun fire, and not long after the attack began, he rescued 3 American soldiers. They were wounded. But quickly, he realized his unit was surrounded, and the only way for them to live was for him to climb himself up a hill under unrelenting enemy fire, where his radio had a signal and he had a chance to get messages out and call in close air support. He realized the urgency of the moment. 80 lives were at stake. When he reached the top, Richardson discovered he was in part of an enemy encampment, but he began work on calling in planes to his position, dumping bombs on the enemies that were positioned nearby. There he remained for 8 hours, directing airstrikes after airstrikes, even after being wounded by a sniper during the first hour of fighting. The airstrikes Richardson called in during that long, lonely battle eventually forced the enemy to retreat. When he was eventually found by other U.S. forces, he declined medical evacuation so he could remain with his troops. His eardrums had been blown out. When he was found, his leg and foot were mangled. Trump said today that he was barely alive. His actions that day saved more than 80 American lives, his fellow soldiers. Story number 2, Staff Sergeant Michael Ollis. Ollis is a soldier from the 10th Mountain Division. He'd been posted to Forward Operating Base Ghazni in Afghanistan's Ghazni province. For some reference, Ghazni is about an hour and a half outside of Kabul, so it's pretty close to the capital. This was August 28th, 2013, when the base was breached by a car bomb. The explosion allowed about 10 enemy fighters wearing suicide vests to make their way inside the outer wall. During the attack, insurgent fighters pelted the base with mortars and RPGs. According to Ollis's medal citation, he accounted for his soldiers and then checked for casualties before running toward the enemy assault. He linked up with a Polish army officer named Karol Siapika along the way to the base's outer perimeter. The two then moved toward the attackers and began to engage them. Ollis hadn't even had time to put on his flak vest or his Kevlar helmet. He only had his rifle and one magazine. While fighting along the perimeter of the forward operating base, it's what they call a FOB, an insurgent came around a corner and immediately engaged them with small arms fire. Staff Sergeant Ollis positioned himself between the insurgent and the Polish officer Siapeka, who had been wounded in both legs and was unable to walk. Staff Sergeant Ollis fired on the insurgent fighter and incapacitated him, but the insurgent detonated his suicide vest, killing Ollis. Called to the podium by Trump, Siapeka at times grew pretty emotional as he paid tribute to Ollis. "A soldier's not something you are from time to time," he said. "It's who you are forever." Siapeka named his son Michael after the American. His son stood briefly for the crowd, which was gathered in the East Wing, sitting shoulder to shoulder in silence. Speaking to a member of Ollis's family, the Polish officer said they were now my second family from Staten Island. He called the United States his second homeland. Master Sergeant Roderick Edmonds led the resistance in a German POW camp during World War II. Edmonds was the ranking non-commissioned officer at the time in early 1945. According to the commendation that was read today at the White House, the Germans announced on January 26, 1945, that only Jewish American prisoners would come out for roll call the following morning. At the threat of execution, Edmonds, who enlisted from Knoxville, Tennessee, determined that allowing segregation would result in the torture or death of 200 Jewish American POWs. He directed officers to have all 1,200 American troops present themselves at roll call. With a German commandant enraged, Edmonds stood his ground and involved prisoners' rights under international law. Trump said the German officer, outraged, placed a gun to the soldier's head and again demanded he make the Jewish American troops step forward. Edmonds declined. "We're all Jewish here," Edmonds said. The German officer relented and made no further efforts to identify the Jewish American soldiers. Weeks later, Allied forces advanced towards the camp. The Germans running the camp ordered the POWs to line up for evacuation in trucks arriving at the prison. Edmonds called for the POWs to go to their formation and then initiated a plan to break formation and run back into their quarters, resisting the German troops to the end. The German forces eventually retreated, leaving the POWs behind. Without regard for his own life, Master Sergeant Edmonds gallantly led his prisoners in a relentless pursuit of opposition and resistance, forcing the Germans to abandon the camp, leaving the 1,200 American prisoners behind, the White House remarks said. Edmonds' son, Chris, accepted the medal from Trump on his father's behalf. I've got two reasons tonight for this post. One, as a person who's seen his fair share of combat, I've always sort of been in awe of what the men and women will unselfishly do to help their fellow service members. I have a hardback book of Medal of Honor winners in my home library, and each of their stories is a tearjerker. I never was a big fan of comic book heroes. And if you read the stories of those awarded the Medal of Honor, you know who the real superheroes are. Often they're regular troops who rise to the occasion in the moment of the greatest need. That single man who steps forward outside the bounds of any good sense. The country couldn't begin to pay them back for their bravery and sacrifice. Often those who win the Medal of Honor die during the heroic actions. And often they know the stakes before making the decision to leap, but they leap anyways. Two Delta Force soldiers from the 1993 Black Hawk Down mission always come to mind for me. The Battle of Mogadishu was a terrible day for the U.S. military. We all remember it. The mission was hastily planned, the objective of capturing the Somali warlord, Mohammed Farid Aidid. It went sideways. Two American Black Hawk helicopters were shot down early in the phase of the mission. Staff Sergeant Randy Shugart and Master Sergeant Gary Gordon. These guys were Delta Force guys, and they were circling overhead in an observer position. They asked several times to the general in charge of the mission, General Garrison, if they could be inserted to go help rescue the pilot who was down on the ground. And they were told several times, no, they can't do that. And they continued to insist, and finally Garrison relented, and they put these guys down on the ground. And the two of them moved closer to where this downed pilot was and helped put him in a position where he could get out of the line of fire and around the Somalis. And they fought to their last round before they were eventually killed by a mob of Somalis, leaving the pilot there by himself. I mean, they knew what they were getting into, and they went anyways. I have a couple of Delta Force friends that were on that mission, real heroes of mine, whose names I wouldn't even say out loud for fear that their insular community would blackball them for even being friends with me. You can't really blame their community for that because of assholes like Pete Hegseth. They're trained to dislike reporters. They always have been. But my friends, they know who they are. Some were even portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down. In interviews for 60 Minutes on a story I did on Black Hawk Down, I even interviewed Michael Durant, the pilot that Shugart and Gordon saved that day. Both men died that day so that he could live. I don't throw the word a hero around very often, mostly because covering wars for the better part of 30 years, I don't think it's healthy to romanticize it. I first decided I wanted to be a war reporter in around 10th grade reading too much Hemingway. He had a way of making everything you read feel romantic and heroic. Bullfighting, deep-sea fishing, boxing. Even romance seemed as brave as it is romantic when it comes from the page that he pens. But on the first day of my first war, crossing my first front line, I about shit my pants. And in the first 24 hours, I was crying like a baby because of a genuine fear. That was in 1993 or 1994 in Bosnia. How I managed to do it for 30 years still amazes me, but I think it wasn't so much that it was my calling, but because I figured I was pretty good at it and not much good at anything else. As we listen to the hero stories today of these warriors, I couldn't help but think about Pete Hegseth and the man passing out the blue ribbon medals, Donald Trump. You can always tell the guys who have never been in real combat before. They puff their chests out. They stand behind real heroes, hoping that the honor will somehow rub off on them. And it doesn't. Pete Hegseth sat in the White House ceremony today like he could relate to these men, a National Guard major, mid-grade officer, who parlayed his job at Fox News into the most important military job in the world. Department of Defense wasn't good enough title for him, so he and his boss, they renamed it the Department of War. It won't last long. I'm certain the next president and person in that position, if they're a Democrat, will come and return the name of the department to its rightful title, the Department of Defense. But until then, as Hegseth does his bad pull-ups to seem tougher than he is, it'll remain on the building. And taking on Venezuela and some fishermen off the coast, I can see where both men feel like the bullying ways that they have been pretty good to them. It only cost the U.S. military $3 billion to capture Nicolas Maduro and his wife. So, bolstered by his recent American victory in South America, this mid-grade officer and his commander-in-chief decided to take on Iran 3 days ago. Word from the president was they tried real hard to get a nuclear deal with Iran, but the Iranians weren't playing ball. Remember, we had a nuclear deal with Iran until Trump blew it up in his first term. But this time, the negotiations were going swimmingly. From the Iranian side, they had given up concessions, but Trump said today, they just weren't going to make a deal, and we just had to do it the hard way. You wonder why the Iranians didn't want to make a deal with them, They send in Jared Kushner, the Jewish-born American son-in-law, leading the negotiations for America. Muslim leaders really love taking ultimatums from Jews, barely old enough to shave. As for Trump, who always is gunning for a Nobel Prize, let it be known that so far in his first year and a bit into this term, he's attacked 7 different countries. 7. Don't believe me? Nigeria, Venezuela, Iran, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. This is the guy that wants a Nobel Prize. Diplomacy apparently isn't his strong suit. He also helped annihilate Palestinian civilians through arms sales to Israel. Previous administrations, like the Biden administration, also contributed to this carnage in Gaza. So far, 70,000 people have been killed. But let's not forget about why we're here tonight. It's to honor the men who won the Medal of Honor. The first man honored today served in Vietnam. Trump dodged the war 5 times by having his daddy arrange for a doctor for him. The doctor, his name was Dr. Larry Bronstein, was a podiatrist in Queens. He lied and said that Trump had bone spurs. This was confirmed by the doctor's daughters, who said it was a favor to Fred Trump, Donald's dad, who was their landlord at the time. Soldier number 2 today died in combat. Remember Alice, killed by the suicide bomber? He was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. In a 2020 Atlantic article, Donald Trump allegedly said soldiers who die in combat are losers and suckers. The reporting was backed up by the AP and the Washington Post. Trump has since denied the claims. According to the reporting at the time, he had made the remarks in 2018 in a visit to France, expressing his reluctance to visit a cemetery where Americans died in World War II and where they were buried. Soldier number 3 today, who stood tall to his German captors. But we really know how he feels about prisoners, don't we? During Trump's 2016 presidential run, Trump said John McCain wasn't a war hero at all. Not a war hero. He was a hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured. I wonder how that rings now with the Medal of Honor he gave out today to a captured American hero that he praised. So maybe the most iconic quote of the day came from the 5-time draft dodger himself. Bravery, he said, it's amazing. You never really know who's brave and who's not until they're tested. When's Donald Trump going to be tested? Like, follow, and share, and comment. If you like what we're doing, head on over to my Substack and get a paid subscription. Thanks, Misfits. Have a good night.